Let's transition now to the headlines that we're looking at for Tuesday, heading into Week 14, and we'll start with the quarterback situations there that are certainly troubling. The biggest one being Lamar Jackson dealing with the knee injury, unlikely to play against the Steelers. Huge game there for Baltimore as they're trying to hold on to their playoff hopes. The team that's trying to catch them in the AFC North, the Bengals, might be getting healthy with one regard in Joe Mixon returning from the concussion, but Hayden Hurst still dealing with the calf injury, probably not going to play against the Browns. Nathaniel Hackett said that Courtland Sutton is day-to-day. Robert Saleh said that Mike White is going to start for the third straight game for the Jets. And Foreman dealing with a rib and foot injuries, expected to play, but this kind of popped up out of nowhere because last time we saw them prior to their bye, he had over 20 touches and was fantastic against the Broncos. So we'll see what happens going in a great matchup against Seattle. Let's talk about a few of these stories here. We'll start with the one in Baltimore. So Tyler Huntley expected to start taking on the Steelers defense. It's obviously been very good against they've been very good the last couple weeks since TJ Watt has returned, but they have given up a lot of production to quarterbacks over the course of the season. Huntley runs a lot, but he doesn't necessarily throw with a lot of success. So Heath, is he going to be a borderline starter in one quarterback league? We know we're probably starting in the Superflex 2 quarterback league.
Borderline starter is the perfect way to put it. I would start Jared Goff over him, but he is in my top 15. I would start Tyler Huntley over Deshaun Watson this week. I would start Tyler Huntley over Tom Brady at San Francisco this week. So there are a couple of guys that I think you consider him. I'm right there with him and Mike White, who's at Buffalo. Both of them against pretty good defenses right now on the road. Very low floors, but considerable upside for both of them. We saw a couple pretty big games. He could run the ball 10 times for 80 yards in this game.
He could also only get about 40 yards. That's what his floor has been for rushing. I don't love him as a passer, and I think the Steelers' defense is getting better. 19 or fewer fantasy points to 3 of the last 4 quarterbacks. You talked about that with TJ Watt coming back, but only 5 quarterbacks all year have hit that 20-point mark. I don't think he does it. He's the right to have him outside the top 12.
It's more of a long-term play, I think, when you'll see the ads for him, because hopefully he does take advantage of whatever opportunity he's going to get stepping in for Lamar Jackson. We clearly would like to see Lamar Jackson back. But in Week 15, they get the Browns. And so if he does have a decent performance against Steelers and starts that game next week, then maybe you feel more comfortable starting him in one quarterback leagues. But obviously, Superflex 2 quarterback leagues should be added across the board. Bengals hoping to get Joe Mixon back. Could be the concussion protocol, according to Zach Taylor. If he's out, Heath, Samaje Perine is?
Top 5 running back. Hey, Samaje Perine higher than Joe Mixon if Joe Mixon's back. But if Joe Mixon's back, he's a borderline top 12 guy, and Perine's a high-end number 3.
Imagine saying that. Higher than Joe Mixon if Joe Mixon's back. Perine's been fantastic.
Well, he doesn't have to share as much either.
Doesn't have to share, exactly. That's the thing. And so you saw this. He did lose a touchdown to Chris Evans against the Chiefs, but still, looking at what Samaje Perine has done, 150 total yards is pretty hard to overlook. And so we'll see if Mixon does clear the concussion protocol. And then, Dave, without Hayden Hurst most likely playing, what does that do for the receivers, if anything? Do they get a bump in terms of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd?
You're going to start Chase. You're going to start Higgins. You won't be confident starting Tyler Boyd, except for the fact that there's 6 teams on bye, so there's a lot of wide receivers missing. So he could come into play as a low-end flex in PPR leagues.
Courtland Sutton day-to-day, according to Nathaniel Hackett, dealing with the hamstring injury. He hasn't produced at a very high level when Jerry Jeudy's been on the field, and Jeudy came back last week after the 2-game absence with the ankle injury. So, Dave, how are we approaching the Broncos passing game?
Judy's going to be a high-end number 3 type of fantasy receiver. I like that he gets a lot of targets from Russell Wilson, even though they're not always great targets because Russ has stunk this year. And Greg Dulcich actually stepped up last week, had a big opportunity. I think he keeps it going if Sutton doesn't play. I'm not starting Sutton either way. In fact, I think he's a candidate to be cut because Judy's back. When are you going to have the confidence to start Courtland Sutton in a fantasy league, especially if it's non-PPR?
I guess just keep an eye on if Jeudy does get hurt in this game. I'm not sure people are cutting Sutton just yet, but I can certainly see where we're going with that because he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 4, and he's been very dependent on Jeudy missing time over the last 3 weeks, 12 or more PPR points in the 3 games prior to the loss against the Ravens. But again, Jeudy played and Sutton got hurt in that matchup. You mentioned Mike White facing the Bills. Robert Saleh saying that he's starting again, 3rd straight game. In the last 2 games, he's over 600 passing yards, so he's doing a good job there. Had the 3-touchdown game against the Bears. Struggled a little bit against Minnesota, but still got you 15 fantasy points. He's averaging 23 fantasy points, I believe it is. 16 fantasy points. He's averaging 23 fantasy points in his 2 starts. It's a little skewed, but how's he going to do against Buffalo?
Well, I think the one thing he's probably going to throw a bunch of passes. He threw it 57 times last week against the Vikings, and we know that the Bills are going to put up points. He's a high-end number 2 quarterback right there with Tyler Huntley. In 4 point per pass touchdowns, it's easy to go with Huntley over White. It's basically a coin flip between those 2 in 6 point per pass touchdown leagues. But I think he'll be in that 15 to 20 point range.
If Braxton Berrios holds on to that football in the end zone at the end of the game against Minnesota, he's over 20 fantasy points.
Or if he doesn't throw to Braxton Berrios, maybe throws to Garrett Wilson.
Oh, yeah, that's usually a good idea. If he does that, then we're strongly considering Mike White as a top 12 quarterback, even though he's playing at Buffalo. The schedule after Buffalo, Jamie, it's Fantastic. Detroit, it's Jacksonville, it's Seattle. this dude could be a league winner for you. So if you've got him on your team already and you're streaming quarterbacks, maybe you make the move to Tyler Huntley this week, but you go right back to Mike White. I expect him to be the Jets quarterback rest of the season.
That's the last part, though. The only thing that I don't quite understand, and I guess I understand why Robert Saleh is doing it, why not just say he's our guy rest of the season?
Right.
Like, he's going to do this week to week, so is he going to maybe switch to Flacco if White has a bad game here? Is he going to go back to Zach Wilson? I just don't understand the language that Robert Saleh is using by not just saying Mike White is our guy, and we'll reevaluate things in the offseason. Like, just there's something clearly holding them back from saying committing to Mike White.
Yeah, they shouldn't go and give Zach Wilson another opportunity. Like what I was about to say was, well, once they're eliminated from playoff contention, they could give Zach Wilson some chances. But why not give that to White? Because White could be their guy until like the end of the year.
Yeah,
right,
so
we're talking about like the last week of the season.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I think we could see a situation where maybe they go to Flacco if he struggles, or maybe they go back to Zach Wilson, which will be a huge stretch. But in any event, the fact that he's going week to
they're
week
competitive with White. I think he's
no,
their guy.
I'm with you, but they're just the fact that he hasn't committed to it for the rest of the season, there could be something there. Last story that we're looking at here, at least for now, is Deontay Foreman saying that he's got this rib injury, foot injury. He says the foot is a little bit more of a problem, but just something to keep an eye on here because it's a fantastic matchup against Seattle. Their last 2 games, this is what they've allowed to opposing running backs: 342 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 113 receiving yards, and a touchdown. The majority of that obviously was Josh Jacobs, but still Cam Akers came in and ran for 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks defense. So Foreman, he's had a very good stretch when he's been given the job after Christian McCaffrey was traded. What would be your interest level in Chuba Hubbard if Foreman does not play?
Low-end number 2 running back, because he's looked better as of late as well, and it is a fantastic matchup. Hubbard might even do a little bit more in the passing game, wouldn't be as good as a rusher, but somewhere between RB 20 and 24.
As I continue to finalize the waiver wire column, I keep moving Chuba Hubbard up and up and up. And so could be somebody that you want to invest in for this week because of Foreman's potential injuries.